Hey, what's up? Today I'm going to show you how to do this faux apothecary cabinet, which is an IKEA hack. It's based on an IKEA product and we're going to modify it and make it our own. Alright, so this is based on IKEA's TARVA 3-drawer chest, which is only 80 bucks. So start with that and I'm going to show you exactly how to modify it to make it look like this expensive antique apothecary cabinet. The Pottery Barn actually sells one for 800 bucks that's really similar to this, so we can do it for a lot cheaper than that. I'm gonna show you exactly how. Okay, so obviously the first step is buying this cabinet, and then I just built the whole thing as is rather than trying to skip ahead and figure out what the changes were gonna be. I decided to just put it together, take a look at it, see where the measurements were gonna be. Now, the main trick here is that you're pretending like there are 9 small drawers, but it's really just 3 doors that open, right? So that means that the lines in between the fake drawers need to look similar to the lines between the real drawers. I've seen people use a router and kind of like do a scoop out shape, but that doesn't match. It needs to look no different than that one. You want it to look as close as possible. So we're gonna be adding those lines in, those fake lines, with a saw right into the wood. So in order to measure that, you want it to be 3 equal pieces. I found the closest I could come up with is measuring from the edge 9 7/8 inches. That seems very precise, but needs to be precise. So go ahead and measure in from both edges 9 7/8 inches and then make a mark. So the easiest way really is just taking a hand saw because it's nice and straight and just sawing right into the top of it. Now be careful you don't go too deep. The further you go, the more we're weakening the front of this. You don't want to go all the way through. It'll just snap in half and you won't have a drawer. I tried to go no more than halfway through. So you want to be really careful that you're not putting too much pressure on one side or another and start digging all the way through. So mark all your drawers and do all of your sawing right into the wood. Now here's another thing I realized. If these were really 3 separate pieces, when they opened and you see the top, it wouldn't be flat across there either, and we still have a flat piece connecting here. So I just cut down with the saw a little bit on the tops and bottoms of all those, the same distance basically, whatever it is, like 1/8 of an inch or something. So now we have a continuous line that goes all the way around. So it looks like we have 3 separate panels on each one of these drawer faces. I also sanded the edge of this because you don't want it to be super sharp. You'll notice that the edge of this kind of has a little bit of a bevel to it, a little bit of a curve, so I'm just, again, matching that as close as I can. So I just took one of those little sander blocks and just sanded inside the cracks here all the way around. So now all of the edges, whether they're real or fake, all kind of have the same shape. Alright, so then the next trick with this to make it look more like an antique cabinet is to add some trim along the bottom and cut the legs down. So I just bought some regular trim at the hardware store. I got it in pine because this was already pine, so that way later it'll all match when we stain it. So I measured the sides and the front to get a single piece of trim, which was 60 inches. This ended up being exactly the right amount. You should probably just get an extra foot. Mine was a little bit tight. You want to give yourself a little bit of room to work with. So once I had the trim, I just put it right on the legs. Instead of having to measure anything, you just set it right on there and make a mark on the top and make a mark on the bottom, and you know exactly where you're going to be cutting. So I just took the handsaw and cut the legs off. It's easier to just leave them on there because they're already nice and solid, and I had my marks, so I just cut right through. So now the legs would be the exact length of my trim and be hidden inside there. Alright, so then you gotta cut the trim down to size. I recommend getting one of these trim cutters. They're only a couple bucks usually, and it comes with a nice little trim saw, and you can really set it in there and get the right angles, because we are gonna have to cut these at a 45-degree angle on the edges, so that way the 2 pieces line up properly. That's pretty standard when you're doing trim. So put it inside the trim cutter and just go through the little diagonal slot there and just cut it right through. Put it back on the cabinet, make sure it's the right size, and if it is, then we can move on to the next piece. Okay, so once your pieces are cut, hopefully they fit nice and snug on there, we're gonna just nail them in to the existing legs using finishing nails. Those are the ones that don't really have like a big head on them, like the kind you'd hang a picture on the wall with. These ones kind of just go straight in. So just make little marks if you need to, and then just hammer them into the wood. By the way, when you're using finishing nails, you wanna hammer them in as far as you can without banging up the wood, but then this is called a nail set. It's just like a little heavy kind of tack thing, and you just hammer the rest of it in so that the nail actually sinks into the wood. So that way there's no nail sticking out. And then you can fill the holes in later with wood filler, and they come in different colors, so get pine because it will match this pine that we're gonna stain later, and it will all match. Alright, so speaking of staining, that is the next step. We're gonna stain this raw wood. You can pick any color you want. There are tons available and they all look really, really cool, especially when you start with just blank pine like this. I went a little bit lighter. I just used one called Puritan Pine. You just take a rag and you wipe it on. It's so easy. You'll see that like this is the fastest part of this entire process. I love staining wood. It's just instant results and it just looks so cool. You do want to make sure it dries though, but once it's nice and dry, then we can move on. Alright, so for the drawer pulls, you can pick out whatever style you want. You're gonna need 9 of them. This particular style is sort of classic looking, makes it look more like an antique, and you can buy new ones that have this look. These I actually bought at a restoration store, which means they were ripped out of an old house, and they sold them for $5 a piece, which is a little pricey depending on your budget for this project, but it was worth it to me because it added a whole kind of vibe of authenticity to this in the end, and it really looks antique, so it's up to you which ones you want to get. So just measure what the center is for these drawers and make some marks so you can screw these in. Now here's a tip. I couldn't find hardware screws that were antique looking or that were a dark color to match my dark drawer pulls, and I didn't want to put some shiny brand new looking screws in there, so I bought a pack of them. They're pretty cheap, and then put them all out on an old piece of wood and spray painted them with matte black, so that way when I screwed them into these handles that are dark and into this cool dark cabinet, they didn't stand out as looking brand new because it would look weird. So that was kind of my trick to sort of antiquing the screws. Okay, so you could move on to the next step here, but I was looking at the whole thing and I decided to add a little bit more stain to just some of the drawers, just to kind of mix it up, make it a little bit more random. And I was thinking that if this was an antique, maybe you got it out of a collection of like 10 of them and all the drawers have been mismatched from who knows where, so you don't want it to look quite so even. So in order to do that, I just masked off some of the edges, some of our fake edges, and added a second coat of stain just to some of them. I just chose kind of like randomly that one, that one, that one. I also added a little bit of stain to the actual edges on the sides because I was noticing that when I was making sure that all the stain went into our kind of fake edges where we did the sawing, that it was kind of seeping in and looking a little bit dark, but the real edges weren't dark, so it didn't look right. So to compensate for that, I just put a lot more stain along the real edges just to try and make it all match. Again, we're trying to sell the illusion that all of these edges are kind of equal to each other. But then the final step is adding a finish to it, or a gloss. In this case, I wanted to go with a high gloss because I wanted it to look like something that got pulled out of like a library or, you know, an old schoolhouse or something. So I went with a water-based polyurethane gloss finish. You'll see it says gloss finish on it. I also use water-based because it's a little bit easier to work with. You can wash the brushes out under the water and stuff. If you get it oil-based, it's a little bit more gnarly, so just a heads up. If you are going with the gloss, a cool trick is to sand in between coats, which sounds crazy if you've never done it before, but it totally works. So if it's dry, use a very fine grit sandpaper and lightly sand all those imperfections out. Then when you add the second coat and that one dries, you'll notice that it is just like silky smooth. It's like glass. And you could even do it a third time if you really want. Alright, so that was it. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments and I'll try and help you out. Be sure to follow me on Instagram too. I'm always posting behind the scenes pictures of cool DIY projects I'm doing here around the house. I'm gonna post more videos of those very soon. Be sure to subscribe for original videos and other DIY projects as well. Alright, see you soon.